Hey there.
Hey there. How are you doing?
Good.
All right, we'll let everybody file in here for a minute.
I'm a little nervous this morning. I was telling Kathy this morning, no matter for how long I've been speaking, I still get a little nervous before I get started.
That's good. It shows that you care.
Maybe. And then I'm nervous about the snow later on for today and having to drive in it. So good. I tell you, my mother's been calling me a nervous Nelly since I've been a young kid, so maybe it's nothing new.
You come by it
naturally.
Nervous right from the beginning. That's good. Shows you care about everything.
Probably.
All right, we're just letting everybody file in here. We'll get started in just a moment.
Sounds good. I'm glad we're talking about this topic. I mean, we'll get into it more as we get into the presentation, but I was trying to think the last couple of days, like, I mean, I've been a DevRel for almost 20 years, but when I first started actually developing content and, even pre, internet days, in most of the companies I was in, sort of in the 90s, I was responsible for writing the newsletters and doing that on it was all hard copy that came out. And
right.
Yeah, it was a little bit harder to go in and fix that typo once it was printed.
Oh, I'm so nervous every time I print something. I am nervous even writing something down on paper. It feels so permanent.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the stats that came out with the State of Developer Relations report. I think on the website we've now uploaded, it's either the 6 or 7 version, because there's somebody that will send me an email. You didn't get, this got missed. I'm like, oh no, but thank goodness it's not in print. So we've got the opportunity to make those changes.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows the internet finds anything wrong you put out, they're going to find it and they're going to tell you. People love finding those
But
errors.
It's good. But the last one somebody found, we were talking about how one of the measurements is time to hello world, and hello world was spelt wrong. It's like, that's got to get changed. That's one of those things that's got to get changed.
To be fair, the spelling is the least important part of the Hello World program, at least. Although if it said Hell World or something, that would be a little different vibe. All right, I think we've starting to get everybody in here. Should we get started here? Caroline, you good with that?
Sure, yeah. And I guess if anybody's got any questions in the meantime, just stick them in there. And I see a few people are saying they get nervous too. And what is it? Snow and is it MN? Is that Minnesota? That school's getting let out early?
Oh man, was there anything better than a day getting let out early for snow? I wish work got off early for snow.
Might happen here too. All right.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining the session. We really appreciate it. I know you could be doing anything with your time, so we really appreciate you being here with us today. We're here today to discuss developer relations and content, why one size doesn't fit all. And so just off the start, a couple of quick housekeeping things. We've kind of mentioned this before, but we will be doing a short Q&A at the end of this. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat there that you should see on your right. If you don't see a chat on your right, then something's wrong, but you'll figure it out. And also, as someone out asked, we will be recording this and it will be available on demand in the future, so you can watch it or share it. If you are watching this in the future already, I hope everything's all right. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of content to DevRel and how you can best create content to serve your developer audience, as well as how to follow that audience through their journey with you. We'll also touch on the future of content with DevRel and how you can ensure you're reaching your diverse, full audience. All right, and joining me today is Carolyn Lakow. Carolyn is an accomplished visionary and entrepreneur who has spent over 2 decades helping develop groundbreaking technology and nurturing community connections and innovations. She started WIP, the first boutique developer relations agency, in 2006. She's led consulting engagements and developer events in over 20 countries, spanning a wide range of platforms and technologies, all the way from edge computing and machine learning to mobile. She's now the CEO of Revere Communications, where she continues to work with both the top companies in the world as well as fast-growing startups, training and mentoring the next generation of DevRel leaders. And we are honored to have you with us here today, Carolyn. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Peter. I'm really happy that you asked me.
Okay, of course. And my name is Peter White. I'm a senior developer with 15 years development experience, which I am currently putting to work as a content strategist for a company called Content Lab. We create developer content. We've been doing it for years across hundreds of clients and thousands of pieces of content. That's all we do. We make content, and we like to think we're pretty good at it. So again, Caroline, thank you very much for joining us. This has been a lot of me gabbing so far, so I want to get to you because I want to ask you to start off something that was in your State of DevRel report, which came out recently. Thank you for putting that out. That's super helpful. And we'll discuss that a little more later on. But one thing that really leapt out to me was how much time that DevRel practitioners are spending on content.
Oh my goodness.
For your studies. Wow.
We live and breathe content.
Why is that? Why is content so important to DevRel? Why is that so paramount?
Like, there's a number of different reasons for why it's so important, but when you think about, content is really important for any type of business that you have, but especially when you think about how developers need to find out about what you do and be able to, they tend to want to try something first and really find out about it before, going to buy a developer tool is not something that you do in the spur of the moment. It's something that has to be really thoughtfully done. And so content is something that's really going to drive that. So yeah, and so what we found, so this was the 9th year we did the State of Developer Relations survey, which turned into the State of DevRel report. And, as you can see here in this information, it's 58%, a little over 58%, where content development is something that we do within DevRel on a day-to-day basis. And the interesting thing, I think, when we take a look at this in general, so this question asks, how does DevRel spend their time? So 58%. But if you take a look at how else DevRel spends their time, advocacy, strategic planning, events, managing teams, product development, marketing, social media, really content comes into play in all of that. So when we say one size doesn't fit all, often the first thing that pops into mind about content, well, it's about writing a blog or it's about writing that newsletter. And truly content comes into play with all of the things that we do in DevRel. So, you can't just write a blog. You really need to think about how things can get repurposed, or how it needs a different tone or it needs a different format for what you're writing for, who you're writing for, what the channels are for. So it's not as easy as it looks at first glance.
For sure. And coming from the developer side, I know it's very important because for me as a developer, content is the way you learn.
Exactly.
It's the easiest, it's the most direct. I don't want to be a cliche developer here, but I would love to learn things without having to ask somebody. So content is the best way to do that. And I think that's fairly straight across the board.
Interesting you say that you don't want to be a cliche developer, but that is true. Whether developers are, want to learn it on their own or, they're not side by side with somebody. They're dealing with a problem right now that they need to solve. So if that content isn't available for them to understand something or make that decision, then you have a content fail, right? You're losing them, or you're creating that friction along the journey.
For sure. And I think something that's not covered enough with content, and I think, you guys talk about it a bit, but is covering the whole spectrum of questions. Like as a developer, I'm embarrassed of the low-level questions that I'll be Googling that I would never ask anybody with my mouth, but I like when I have to get to look them up and there is content. It's important to make sure that you're not just, every piece of content doesn't have to be finding a way to the moon or a cure for cancer or something. It's important to
yeah, for sure. And
everything.
You go to school and you learn, you learn a couple of languages, but there's some other studies that show that developers learn on their own. They learn by doing. They learn on their own. It's not something they learn in school. And when you look at all of the different languages and tools that are out there, there's no one developer that can know it all. So there has to be a place where they can come and learn and get those questions answered. It's crucial.
Definitely. There's no way around it really. And I mean, content is, the saying is always it's very hard to market to developers because a lot of traditional marketing doesn't work. So content really allows you to kind of slip in the marketing to something that may be more education focused as opposed to a direct ad or
For
something.
sure. And, we always say with content too, that, 80% of it needs to be more about feature driven. What is this? What can I do with it? What language do I need to know? What are the dependencies? That's most important, as opposed to, this is the easiest, this is the tool that gives you the easy button. It's like, okay, great, but easy button for what? And what else do I need to
For
know?
sure.
And, it can't just all be about, all the buzz that's out there. That's not going to be what's going to eventually help developers build what they need to build.
For sure. And I mean, anytime as a developer you hear something like that, like this is the easy way to do something, or this is the easy button, you go, it's not.
Exactly.
I'm gonna have to write more code for this. This is gonna end up being more difficult. It's not gonna work with what I'm using. I need to see it work. That's why content is so good, because I need to see this thing. You need to prove it to me line by line that this is gonna work and it's gonna make it easier. If I'm gonna
Yeah,
believe
if you're just saying something's easy, you're probably going to get the face palm going. Yeah, right. Okay,
Yeah.
Stu,
You
let's
show me
see
it's
the
easy.
next.
Don't
Let's
tell
see
me
what
it's
the
easy.
competitors are offering.
Yeah, for sure. I immediately closed if the headline is supercharged or whatever, and like, I don't know.
The bullshit detector goes off. Oh, am I allowed to say that?
That's it. I mean, I think it starts on, and I think you have to prove to turn it off, to be quite honest with you. I think most developers are skeptical of anything that they're about to do.
Yeah, that's so true.
And,
That's so true.
But I mean, on the flip side of that, another thing that comes up from your report is that, I mean, content does work.
Absolutely.
It is a very effective tactic. I mean, there's no way around making content, so you might as well try to make good content because it is, as your report says, the most effective tactic.
Yeah, and when I take a look at that number of 57% saying it's the most effective tactic, I keep coming back to, content again isn't just about the blogs and the tutorials, but you might be, is an effective tactic doing workshops? Yes. Do you need content for your workshops? Yes, you do. Where does that come from? You might be going to an event. Do you need content for the event? Yes, you do. So I think really content touches everything you do, and being able to really effectively put it together and then figure out how to multi-purpose it is really the key to being successful.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, getting the most out of your content. It takes so much time and effort to make content. If you're not, like you said, repurposing it as best you can, then you're kind of leaving a lot on the table.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So I'm just answering somebody who said, is that Frida Kahlo in the painting? And yes, it is.
Good eyes. You've been doing the survey for a lot of years now. Has this number kind of gone up and down, or has this kind of been steady for the last while?
It has gone up over the last, I would say over the last couple of years, especially within the COVID period, it's remained as the number one focus. 5 or 6 years ago, we were seeing a lot more around events. We were seeing a lot more around hackathons as sort of the most effective outreach tactic. But now again, things are more online. And early on too, 15 years ago when we were starting off in mobile development, like where did we go and find developers? We went to Silicon Valley, and we would go to New York or Chicago. We'd go to Berlin. We'd go to London. Probably something in Israel, and there was kind of a few key cities where the majority of developers were, and finally we kind of, brought our heads up and said, wait a minute, like, and then when we were hearing more about, there's fabulous developers in Ukraine, there's fabulous developers in Romania. Hey, like, don't forget about the developers that are, over in Korea or wherever they were. And it really made all of us more aware that we needed to optimize for content online, because just because somebody can come to your hackathon in San Francisco, we tended to see the same people go to the same hackathons and win the same hackathons all the time. And so, there was a real realization, I think, for everybody that developers were, that the number of developers were growing, and where they was everywhere. And so we really needed to optimize again online to be where developers were at the time where we needed developers to be. So yeah, in that way, content has really become a bigger story for DevRel over the last few years.
That's a very good point. I mean, this last couple of years have been very good for that, to realize that developers are everywhere. It's not what you picture every time. It's not a guy dressed like me in Silicon Valley
Exactly.
doing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be anybody, and it is
Yeah.
anybody.
If you should have a hoodie on though. Right?
Oh, I do. I promise you.
Okay.
I promise you, I've always got a hoodie on. I can't leave the home without the uniform, I promise. So the flip side of this, of content being the most effective tactic, is that it's also challenging.
It is challenging.
I mean, that is something that also came up in this study, is that almost 42% of surveyees, I'm not sure which respondents, almost 42% of respondents said that continuous content creation is their biggest challenge that they face every day. Has that gone up? Has that become more challenging lately? Or is that
definitely, because there is that need for content all the time. You need to be consistent. You need to have good content, and so who makes that content? And it would often fall, a couple of places. It would fall to marketing, which didn't have the technical chops to write the technical information that was really needed, or it would fall to the developers who have done the development on the product, who were not necessarily comfortable with technical writing, or you find too that the developers who wrote the product, I say it's like this thing where you've placed that thing down somewhere in the house, and it's like, is that? And you probably are looking at it, 100 times, and then finally you see it again. And it's the same thing, if you've written the code and you know how this product works, you have your workarounds, or you skip over a few steps in your mind because you know how to do it. Well, when you've got new developers coming to use your product, you can't skip over those steps. That creates friction for them. So being able to find people who can write things in a really positive marketing sort of way, but be able to be detailed enough to have the technical information that developers need is important. And again, content is about some of those outreach messages you have, but it's also about writing documentation. And it's really hard to find, one person who can do all of that.
For sure. And oftentimes, if you find the one person who knows everything and could maybe write it down, they're busy building the thing. They don't really have time. And I mean, as a company, you probably don't want them to take the time to be writing content.
Yeah,
as
that
to building
too.
your
Or they'll do, you can see that they do it well, but yeah, they're busy doing something else. And it's like, well, we're expected to put out that newsletter once a month, or we're expected to make sure that how many times have you gone to a site and the documentation is out of date?
Oh, yes, there's nothing more frustrating.
Right? And it is so frustrating. But again, like the devs who are doing it, well, they're already on the next build, and they haven't gotten into the hang of things to get that next documentation up to date, or put that next blog out that says, hey, here's what the changes were, and here's some of the different things that you can do with our tool. So we say, is content creation in DevRel vigorous? Yeah, it's this constant thing that needs to get done. So it is challenging for sure.
Yeah, I think the word continuous really is the key word in there, because I mean, I've seen this with a lot of clients. I'm sure you have as well. When people start making content, you have a bunch of ideas, and you go, we've got enough ideas forever. And then, 2 months in, you go, oh no, the wells run dry. Yeah. How do I keep? I mean, generating ideas every day is not an easy thing to be doing.
Yeah, somebody said it's an infinite game. I think that's a good way of putting it. And so it's important to have a plan. To have a content plan, to think about what that cadence is of how you're going to push out information, and being able to pivot. If something comes up, and be able to do it. So certainly within what we've done for ourselves and for what we've done for clients that we've worked with, like we come up with an annual plan. Like, what is it going to be? And is it going to be, again, are we writing blogs? Is it documentation? Is an ebook coming out? To be able to make things a little bit, you don't want the same thing all the time either.
That's another part of the continuous. That's another part of the continuous process. You have to keep across multiple formats. You have to keep changing formats. You have to make sure you're getting across to everybody. And I mean, beyond that, like you said, everything keeps changing. You need to keep up with everything. You need to keep up with all the new releases of everything related to your product, what your competitors are doing. And I mean, honestly, a lot of companies don't have the resources to do that.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more companies, there's a number of companies out there, including yours, that are supporting companies for building content. So we're seeing a lot more of that, which then offers that extra challenge of being able to manage external contributors. And, some companies, do a good job of not only doing the writing is one hand, doing the editing, and then, maybe you need some images to go with it. There's a whole range of content that's just beyond writing a couple of lines of a blog or, a quick start guide. There's a lot more that goes to it. So being able to, manage whether it's external contributors and being able to manage the whole process is something else that, DevRel people need to be able to handle.
For sure, and that is again, not to keep grabbing stats from your report, but over 36% of people are using external contributors.
Not a surprise.
And I mean, I think it's good, and not just because it pays my bills or anything, but I think it is good for a company because, like you said, when you have people who wrote the product writing the content or the documentation, it's not always the best way to get it across. I mean, I've been a developer for a long time, and I've written a lot of software, and I've used a lot of software that people have written. And when I go to a developer who's written a piece of software to be like, hey, how do I use this? They go, just use it, stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems so easy.
Yeah.
You miss a lot of like you said, the early steps. It's hard to give a full overview objectively of your product and how to use it if you've built it yourself.
I think too,
having
and developers now expect this. I remember about 10 years ago, we were, it was a telco that we were doing some work with, and they had just released some APIs, had very little documentation around it. And there was a bunch of developers that were just like, they just got together and they wrote the documentation, for the telco because they needed it and they were so frustrated by it. But that's not going to cut it anymore, right? That's not going to cut it anymore. Developers are expecting that is going to be there for them because they have a lot of other options to go other places for what they need.
100%, yeah, 100%. And also, I find too, I don't know if you find this, but especially with maybe some smaller clients, but if the people who are making your content don't live in that developer world, like if they don't live in the exact world of the people you're targeting, it's really hard to understand that world. It's really hard to speak to them. So bringing someone in who does know that world makes a huge difference.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you've got to be able to speak the language. You've got to be able to, and it's really specific. We talk about this a little bit later, I think, but developers are just so varied depending on how you work and what you work on. It's very. If you're one developer, I don't know the whole developer world. I mean, I was a back-end developer for most of my life. So
nobody can know it all.
I don't know
too much to know. There's just too many languages.
Sure.
There's too many tools out there. And I'll just make one point on this, I guess, before we hit to the next slide. Is, I'm a consultant, right? So I'm all for let us help you manage your content and help you write some of it. But the other piece that's, I think, something we need to just briefly touch on is, and it also comes out of the survey, is just how small the DevRel teams are. And, for any of you out there who actually manage budgets or have the opportunity to build DevRel teams, hire more people. We need, DevRel teams shouldn't be so small. We need more people within DevRel. And, it's not just a one-person job. It's a team. DevRel is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. And, we need more people within those within those teams to help with all of the DevRel pieces and tactics that go on.
For sure, yeah. There's definitely companies who do not put enough resources into it and then get mad when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you go, well, if you don't put the resources in, it's not going to happen. And so this next slide is taken from your book, actually, the DevRel book. If you guys haven't read it, you should. It's a wonderful book, and I think it does a really great job of illustrating kind of what content is and how you can it's not just putting up something to help people, it's guiding developers through how to use your product and the whole journey. I was wondering if you could kind of tell us a little bit about this info.
Sure. So it's something we had been working on for a while, and I think, we are surprised at the great response this has gotten. And often I'm talking to people and it's like it's pinned up on the wall behind them. And I think that's just so cool. And they don't even realize we put this together. But the important part of this journey map is that it's looking at it from a developer perspective. So it's putting your developer hat on, your user hat, your customer hat on, going, what are they looking for as they go? And we find this has been really helpful, not only for the development teams, but especially for folks outside of that process who are used to a B2C, a business to consumer or a business to business model, sort of traditional marketing, where you create some awareness, somebody buys something and you never need to talk to them again, really. Where it's very different, like we mentioned earlier, the developer is discovering you, they want to figure out, then they want to evaluate, like, does this meet my needs? What are some of the things I'm going to do? Okay, how do I learn it? I want to actually try to build it. I want to see if I can get to that hello world, that speed to MVP. And all of these pieces, all of these touch points, all of these pieces have content that are so important as the developer goes on that journey. So even if you just have the docs, okay, that's great, but now you need to create awareness, and then often we find that people are, they're doing a lot of the blogs and the events and the newsletters, but then developers come onto the website and, there is no quick start guide. They can't even figure out where anything is. So everything really needs to go, hand in hand to make sure developers have that really smooth journey. We often get asked too, it's like, well, what is a developer program? It's like, really, this is a developer program. This could be a roadmap for you to build out the program and really evaluate it again from how the developer is moving through the system, the type of decisions they make, and the information content they need to make those decisions and build along the way.
That's super helpful. I mean, I know myself, I see a lot of clients who will just focus on one aspect. They'll just focus on awareness or something. And you go, well, and then later on you hear complaints about why aren't developers moving from knowing us to using us to buying us? Like, you really need to guide them the whole way. Is there an easy way for companies to kind of be able to tell where their content is breaking down along this path?
We do them, and we encourage other folks to do friction logs, and especially get outside developers to try and give it a test. Like, how many steps does it take for somebody to discover you to actually go to the build, or are they able to at all? And often there's some places to break down. So you might be measuring time to hello world. You might be measuring like how many people are actually coming from whatever you're doing in terms of awareness building and your SEO to landing on that blog or landing on some page that you designate. Are they taking the next leap? Do you have some sort of call to action that shows them to come to this doc, or come and look at these code samples, or whatever you think that optimized journey is? And there are ways to measure that along the way, or do some friction logging to really figure out what that is. And
that's fair. Is there, and this might be a bit of a loaded question, but when you notice that breakdown and you find that breakdown, I find it sometimes hard to tell exactly why that reason is. Is there any easy way, aside from just years of experience, to be able to know why content is not working?
If you're, there's some tools out there that can help now, but you really need to be able to, technically have, if you're using some sort of content management system or, CMS system that's showcasing where you can follow developers and where they're going, and you can see where they drop off. If you are able to measure that, or able to watch where those drop-offs are, that will really help you a lot. Yeah, either that, or again, having some developers in and watching what they do. I think there's probably those couple of ways. I don't know, do you have any other ideas about that?
I think you have to hire one of us to do it. I think that's the only way. No, I'm joking. No, obviously, yes. There's what you said is following developers through the journey is really it. Is knowing where they fall off, and I mean, far be it for me to say, but ask them why.
Well,
figure out why. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think there's any real way around, to me, around having developers involved in the process if you really want to get it right and understand what's going on.
Yeah, you're right too. People are often, they don't necessarily want to hear what they're doing wrong, so they don't ask the question. But if you don't ask the question, you're not going to know how to improve. So being able to hold office hours, or maybe you've got some Discord channel or a forum or whatever it is, yeah, ask. Yeah, I don't think I know any developers that never have any opinions if you don't ask them.
That's 100% right. I've never seen a piece of code that you couldn't give it to a developer and have them complain
Have an
about
opinion on
something.
something. So yeah, just ask.
That's fair. I think that leads us into our next topic here, which to me is really the kind of root of great content, which is understanding your audience.
Yeah, for sure.
I find, I don't know about you, but I find a lot with clients when they talk about their audience, they really narrow it down to a single person. They go, this is our audience, this is our target, this is who we're trying to speak to. And I find that, I think that's really doing a disservice to the audience as a whole. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah. A developer is not a developer is not a developer. There's and they may be part of a larger decision-making unit within a company deciding on the tool as well. And that's important to know. So if anybody's read our book on developer relations, we've got a segmentation process and a persona process that you can go through that will really help you narrow down who that target market is and who that audience is. And, often you'll hear, well, it's just developers. Again, it's the t-shirts and the hoodies, and they don't like being marketed to. It's like, yeah, you can get those kind of psycho and demographics about developers on one hand, but just using that is not enough to know what you need to design your content. What kind of languages do they have? What are their use cases? What are they actually probably working on? That's going to be really important to help you figure out what kind of content is going to be really important to them. What are their timelines on things? Do they have any decision-making, authority in that? Something that I saw, I forget who brought it out, and it's certainly something we talk about in the book as well, is developers actually are going to want to know, and that decision-making unit is going to want to know, what's your pricing structure? Like if that's hidden and not there, that's actually content that's important for, as you design what your content path is. So, doing your segmentation is just so important. And somebody on one of the DevRel Slack channels I saw just yesterday was saying, I'm trying to reach, AI and ML developers. Even that is too broad of an audience. Are you trying to reach data scientists who are building their own algorithms, or are you working with somebody who's actually designing the model, or are you working with the project team that needs to integrate that model into the project they're working on? Totally different needs, totally different content needs, different decision making, very different. So knowing what your audience is and what they're working on is really important.
For sure, 100%. And yeah, I run into this one a lot. Like you said, languages, I think, is a big one. I think sometimes companies will put out a tutorial in one language and go, well, that's good enough. And anybody who uses something slightly different, they can just read this and do. But that's just not how it works. The languages and you're comfortable in those languages. And if you're forced to read something in something different, I shut the page down. I'll come back when you write it in a language that I know. I've been doing this for 15 years, but I know maybe 3 languages great. And everything else is like, now it's more work for me to read through this tutorial. I get in this argument with clients sometimes. I go, if you're going to make this tutorial and your product can do this in 5 languages, we have to do this 5 times.
Exactly.
In order to reach everybody. There's just no way.
Yeah.
It's like if your audience spoke 5 different languages, you wouldn't just write it in Spanish and hope for the best. You need to go to developers.
Yeah, whether it's the technical language or the spoken language, what's important to where your developers are and what they need to know. So
yeah, the amount of effort to repurpose it in a different language is not that much versus the reward on the other end, which is actually giving developers what they want.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. And and many people have talked about this, and we do as well, as having that repurposing plan. So You know, if you're focused on with your product team on putting that webinar together, turn it into a blog, turn it into an ebook, turn it into some, you know, there's lots of different places to be able to use that content. And what a waste of effort if you're not thinking about repurposing it. And repurposing it can be making it, you know, making it a different type of content, again, from the blog to the tutorial to the, you know, ebook or something, or the, you know, what, something different. Or it's also looking at where can you syndicate, you know, so it might be on your blog and then maybe you put it on dev.to, or maybe it's something that you can do within some subreddit that you're part of, making sure you're not marketing, of course, and being sensitive to the communities, but you know, being able to have even those sound bites that you might want to be tweeting about, you know, that's part of repurposing content as well.
For sure, and I think it's also important to, when you think about repurposing, is like you mentioned, different formats, because that's the other thing about the developer community, is that they don't all learn the same way.
Very
Some
true.
people don't like to read a blog. Some people want a video, or some people want a podcast or something. You need to, yeah. It's not all. I mean, myself, I prefer a blog, but I know lots of people who don't. So it's about hitting everybody. So you want to repurpose it in a way that gets the most, not just out of the content, but out of the format as well.
It's interesting you say that. I'm a very fast reader, so I like the written parts too. But not everybody, you know, not everybody learns that way. Some people are more visual learners, and again, having that repurposed, you know, content in different ways is important. And we've certainly seen too over the last probably 5 years how much more important, and that developers tend to like more videos, and how YouTube, it's something we've seen in our survey too, where, you know, YouTube was very low down on what channels were important, and I think it's number 4 now in terms of,
oh, wow,
you know, what channels are really important for outreach.
Yeah, I mean, that's how people learn now. If you don't know something, you go to YouTube. That's the easiest way for just about anything. I mean, it's the first thing I do if I don't know how to do something. But so I do think it's important. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the difference in the audience, because again, people just think of developers as developers, but there's a broad spectrum of developers, how they learn and how they work and how they act. And these stats are from Stack Overflow this year that show that almost 22% of developers identify with some sort of neurodiversity. And I feel like that's a very underrepresented group in content.
Yeah,
yeah,
very much so. And yeah, we're seeing that both in the survey that we did amongst our own developer relations people. So we're kind of reflected in some of this. But I'm glad that Stack asked this question this year, because it is important for us to think about. And, you know, can you afford to lose 22% of your market if you're not providing them with content in the way they can ingest it properly? And so, you know, does that mean that we need to have, again, equal amount of videos and tutorials? Do you need to make sure that you've got closed captioning on your video so that you know, encompasses more people? Do you need to make sure you're speaking a little slower so, you know, that's a little more helpful? You know, we often do when we're nervous, we talk really fast and then we're just going to go like neurodiversity, blah, 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 blah. And like, you know, didn't quite capture that. Or, you know, I guess in some places when you're listening to things, you can either slow up or speed down the sound, and which is a good thing. But yeah, again, you know, being really thoughtful about what this means for folks, and, you know, color might be part of it too. And this is actually an area that I want to learn more about, so we're better prepared for it. And, you know, I know people like more video, and I know it's about closed captioning. I'm really not, you know, I'm not sure what else needs to change, but I know I want to find out how that needs to change. So, you know, if anybody here has got some of those answers, like, you know, please share them with the general community. I think it's something we all need to be more cognizant of and do a better job of making our content available.
For sure. I mean, I think you hit it right in the head there. I think the important thing is that you have to acknowledge that we all have more to learn, and we want this to reach as many people as possible. I mean, you know, we're making content for developers. Not, I know we're doing it as marketing, but that's not the main goal. The main goal is to help developers use your product and get ahead. And I think it's important to keep that in mind and be humble about the fact that we don't have all the answers.
You know, as we say in our book, in developer relations, we are here to serve the developer. So how do we best serve them? You know, what is their learning style? What is all of that?
For sure. And I mean, that leads to we talked about this a bit already, but repurposing content in a way that people can take it in. It's, you want to try to be as inclusive as possible.
It's something we're all talking about more of, and we'd definitely like to see somebody share some more information on how to do it better.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there you go. You have to ask. Sometimes you just have to ask because you don't know the answers.
Please help me learn.
All right, we're getting towards the end of our time here. So I want to take a quick second to kind of ask you a little bit about how you picture the future of content in DevRel. I mean, you've been doing this study for so long now. You must be able to identify some trends and some predictions for what's going to happen in the future.
What does the future of content look like? Well, you know, I think we're going to continue to get better at it, and we're all so much more aware of how, you know, DX or developer experience and the developer journey is important. So we are seeing more and more people use that journey and be thoughtful about it. You know, definitely that approach about different learning styles. We're definitely seeing more of that. And you know, what you mentioned, Peter, earlier, well, like, you know, I guess Twilio came up with the meme, but like, ask your developer, what do they need? Ask your developer.
Yeah, that makes a big difference for sure. And a note that's on the slide that I think is important that we haven't really talked about is I think in the future, a lot of people need to put a little more effort into housekeeping and keeping things refreshed, because tech content gets old so quick. And there's so much content out of date that's on there. And so many times I'll search for something and you'll find something from 2018 or something. It's only 4 years, but it's not even close to relevant anymore. And it doesn't work anymore. And if you have tutorials on your site that simply don't work, I mean,
that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Although I often find too, like, you'll be looking for something and you see something that's old and you go, well, that's old. It's not important anymore. But maybe it is. So there needs to be, I don't know, maybe somebody needs to come up with something that says, you know, this is still relevant. Even though we wrote it 4 years ago, it's still relevant.
I've seen some people do it. They'll put a last update on the top that's recent, even if they haven't really updated it. Just to let you know, this was updated in 2022. We checked it out.
It's still working. Yeah.
I think, again, this leads back to what you're saying earlier about people maybe not giving the resources to DevRel that they need. This is a lot of work. I mean, we're talking about it slightly flippantly, but it's very hard to keep an accurate record of all your content and when it's going out of date. To be honest, I'm not even sure the best way to approach that other than
that's a good point. You know, we for ourselves and for our clients, we've got a manual process that we use, but anybody out there looking to create a tool to better manage content, I think that's necessary right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It would take something really sophisticated to be able to test to see if anything's out of date with that process, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the chat right now, and somebody says that learning style is a myth and has put a book out. So I'm definitely going to do my research on that to find out. I don't know if learning styles are a myth. I've got a nephew who's on the spectrum, and learning styles are definitely not a myth. Not a myth there, but you know, we certainly can't generalize.
No, I mean, you know, in my opinion, everybody learns a bit different. I know if you show me a video, I'm not going to remember any of it. I need to read it. It's I know for myself that's my issue, and I've seen people who are the opposite. I believe that everybody is most effective in a certain format, but it's always hard. It's not always easy to nail down what that is.
But certainly, what the point on the chat here is, it often depends on what is being taught. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say across all of this that there's no blanket easy answer. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this talk, is that there's no one size fits all solution.
No, there really isn't. And you know, I really love it when I can see people, you know, have, you know, show different ways of presenting content. And maybe we'll see some more interactive type content, now that we can do so many different things, online, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens in the future.
For sure. I think that is the best way to do it. I mean, I've seen, a few companies who would have content, but then right with it, you have kind of like a sandbox area for the product, and you can just try the thing right on your site, which I think is a great way to do it. All right, well, we're almost out of time here, Carolyn. So I think we can take a couple of questions. We've got a few minutes left. So if anyone has any questions,
sure,
feel free to put
comments
them in
or
the chat.
questions would be great.
We've got a couple that we can take a look at here. The first one that's come in is a question: how do you get buy-in from stakeholders for content marketing? So, I mean, in my opinion, it's, obviously that's a toughie. That's not an easy thing to do, because it's not easy to just point at the ROI for content. It's you can't just slide numbers in front of people and say go that easily. But I mean, there's a reason that every big software company invests heavily in content, because I mean, creating a community is big, not just for sales, but also for improving your product. I mean, you want people to be using your product. That's the only way to perfect it and get it out there. So I think it's important to convince your staff of this, because there may not be an immediate obvious ROI, but building a community is the way to sustain people.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's less need to convince people of managers of content, but being able to show the kind of content that you need when you need it, coming back to the journey is important, to show somebody that like this is what developers need to help them, make decisions and be able to be successful. You want them to be successful in building. And, once a developer uses a tool, as long as their product's around, it's going to be long term. So having them be successful and stick around is really important. And, showing some of that measurement along the way, where they're coming in and when they're dropping off, and asking those questions will be part of the what you need in your own toolkit to help somebody else see the value of it and make those decisions.
That's very helpful. Great. Another question here from the chat. It seems that most of DevRel is aimed at driving awareness. How do you see that changing in the future, or will this always be the case? Carolyn, the trends of what's happening?
Yeah, I don't see that it's just solely focused on awareness. New programs for sure. If there's a new product out, it has to be around driving awareness. But I certainly am seeing a real mix of awareness and the developer learning, which is equally important in content. Yeah, I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing things more balanced these days.
That's fair. That's a very good point. This question is somewhat related to that. What's your take on developer education in product? Any learnings or experiences you can share?
I'm not sure exactly what the question means.
I realize that,
Michael, if you want to maybe sort of restate that, but developer education is so important, and that that's where we look at whether it's the tutorials or the webinars or any of the other learning resources that go around it. It is part of awareness building, because developers are going to want to see that you've got that. But in order to, again, make them successful, you've got to have, it's an imperative to have the developer learning as part of that. It's so important. Yes, do it.
Especially if your product is new or novel or different. I mean, if you make a product that's the same as an existing product everyone knows, if I make it, if I'm selling Google's Word ripoff or whatever, you can go, this is the same as Word. But if I have a product that's new, if you don't teach developers how to use it the whole way through, they're not going to be able to pick it up and go.
So Michael's saying content outside of blogs. Yes, yes, have those tutorials. And even inside the product, we're seeing now that more and more SDKs too are actually having more of the information inside of them. But being able to have, whether it's the startup guide or the FAQs or again, some extra use cases or coding samples or webinars on how this was done. Super important as part of that product. I see that as all part of DevRel. Like that's all DevRel. It's not just about the blogs and the learning and the awareness building.
For sure. I mean, those in-product ones I find as a developer are very nice because as soon as you open it up and there's tools and it feels like it's updated, you go, okay, I'm not on my own here. Yeah. These people are here to help me through, and that makes me feel better.
Absolutely.
Okay, this one's from Tashi for Carolyn Lika. How do you approach regional social media channels to reach different audiences? What upcoming platforms are there for the DevRel community?
I don't know what upcoming platforms there are. If you know something, let the rest of us know. I think that's a tough one. Like you've got to know where your audience is, and we are seeing too. What was really interested in the survey, we asked the question, where is your company located and where are you located? And when we actually look at where DevRel people are located, we're located all around the world. And I think that, there's a lot of DevRel folks in Africa and in Asia and I think we're going to need more of those DevRel folks who understand that local nuance of languages and what people need to learn. And even internet connectivity can make a really big difference based on where developers are.
That's an excellent point. I mean, we talked so much about developers talking to developers because they know the languages, but that works across the world too. If somebody's from a geographic region, you can connect better with those developers because you just know how they speak, how they learn, who they are.
I have to say too, I was supposed to be on a Twitter chat about a month or so ago, and I happened to be on a farm in Ontario visiting my cousin, and I had a really difficult time because the internet just wasn't as consistent there as I'm used to, at home with my fiber to the home. It was, and that's just in Canada, right? Like you can go to a lot of other places and it's something to consider.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree very much so. All right, I think we have time for one more question here. If there's any further questions, we will respond to them in an email or a blog post or something. We'll get answers to you. But we got time for one last question here. What are some of the ways that you measure the efficacy or success of the developer content that you create? Do you have any particular metrics that you
everybody's got different things to measure. How many people have signed up? How many people have downloaded your tool? How many people have created something? Are there people now, contributing in GitHub to something, again, something to your tool that you need? There's definitely different ways to do it. And also, we really believe in having friction logs done on a regular basis to see how developers are working their way through your system. And actually, we're coming up with what we're calling our DX score, different ways to sort of track that too. So actually, maybe that's a future measurement and a future thing that people will find useful.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it really depends on what your goals were when you outside.
For sure.
Every company's in a different place, so it really depends what your goal. If you're just starting, obviously it's awareness. You want people to sign up, but if you're farther on, it's probably conversions. It's. I know it's a cop-out answer, but it's unique to almost every circumstance, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Who are your developer? What's your product? And what are the goals of the company? Are you a big company, small company, new company, old company? It's all of that.
Yeah. I wish we could give you a nice short civil answer, Andrew, but there's no one sentence way to sum that up.
There isn't, but I always like to sum up DevRel as like, where would we rather be? We get to play and see and learn about really interesting technology that's changing the world, and we get to be part of this every day. So, is some of this a little bit challenging? Is it a little bit difficult sometimes? Sure, but it's super exciting and we get to be creative. And I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I can't think of a better place I'd rather be.
Well, I think that's a great way to sum it up and a great way to end it. Carolyn, thank you so very much for taking the time to do this.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks to everybody who
thank you to everybody
who showed up and or are going to watch it later on. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Okay, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And get in contact with us if you have any further questions or anything. We'd be happy to answer. And any other questions in the chat, we'll send out an email with some answers.
Sounds great.
So thank you very much, everybody. And I hope you enjoyed and have a good rest of your
Bye.
day. Bye, everybody.